Hello, everybody, and welcome to another OpenShift Commons briefing. Today, we're going to hear from two of my favorite members of the OpenShift product management team, Mark Curry and Steve Spiker, on what's new in Red Hat's OpenShift Container Platform 3.9. We heard last week from Tushar. He did a wonderful deep dive on storage, and so there'll be another video and set of slides up shortly with that background. So that relieves Mark and Steve of talking deeply about that, but gives them more time to go in to more depth on other topics. And there's lots to talk about. So I'm going to let Steve and Mark introduce themselves and get started here.
Hi, thanks, Diane. This is Steve Spiker. I'm part of the product management team. I work on managed services and also a number of the experience aspects of the web console and developer experience.
And my name is Mark Curry. I'm an OpenShift product manager responsible for container infrastructure.
All right, let's get started. So when we talk about OpenShift, we talk about how it's enterprise Kubernetes. And so when we talk about that, we kind of build it up from kind of the layers of the platform itself. And so we'll go through this presentation actually some from the top down. And so we'll talk about some of the services that run on the platform, some of the self-service capabilities, the web console, some of the developer experience aspects, and then we'll get into some aspects of the container and orchestration cluster management pieces, Mark's areas of expertise, and then we have in our presentation material on the end some of the things we've pushed out just due to sort of the time constraints. There are just too many good things to talk about in such a short period of time. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about how the roadmap looks from the various releases. So we're talking right now about the 3.9 release, which is due out in the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. But we've also just put out the 3.7 release in early December, which comes with the Kubernetes 1.7 part of the platform bundled in. And then in 3.6 in August was part of Kubernetes 1.6. And then as you can expect, we'll continue to have a similar cadence beyond 3.9, where we shoot for 3.10 in June timeframe. Times are and dates are subject to change, of course. But one of the things you may notice is one thing that we don't have a 3.8 release on this picture. One of the reasons for that is we decided to jump ahead and bundle Kubernetes 1.8 and 1.9 in the single 3.9 offering. So when you do the 3.9 upgrade, it'll just silently do the Cube 1.8 upgrade under the covers and then move you up to the 1.9 base platform. And that allowed us to kind of sync up with the Kubernetes releases just as the timing of the releases laid based on the end of the year and the Kubernetes releases themselves. So that was a high level, the roadmap and the schedules for the releases. We look about the sort of core release themes of OpenShift Container Platform 3.9. You look at sort of the extensibility of the application platform itself. So one of the things that we expanded on was in 3.7, we first released the service catalog and a new user experience. We're expanding on that with different capabilities as far as the Ansible playbook bundles for the various databases, bundling in some additional content with SCL. We'll get into that more. Great number of great security enhancements, manageability, workload diversity, and then continue to evolve in a container runtime based on the container runtime interface standard called CRIO or CRIO. So digging into sort of the green layer at the top of the stack, we've updated a number of and also included some new middleware services that are out there. So Red Hat Decision Manager, now available, has been sort of rebuilt or architected with containers in mind, and OpenShift as a platform. Provides a high-performance rules engine based on Drupal 7, the popular community project in this area. And then additional capabilities around the rules editor itself, some decision tables, web-based rule authoring, and so forth. And then some additional capability around those rules, around the management repository for those rules, and some built-in governance to help you control both who is updating those rules and using them for what. So rules for your rules, if you will. And another exciting announcement is one thing we've heard is the community loves Node.js and loves running it on the platform. They would just like a more frequent or updated release cycle for the Node.js pieces themselves. So happy to announce as part of the Red Hat OpenShift application runtimes now Node.js is part of that. So you'll see some kind of dedicated tooling and boosters to help you deploy Node.js applications to get started with some specific architectures or architectural patterns of leveraging Node.js as a implementation or runtime technology. It'll have source to image support that's built-in capability to OpenShift, so you'll have support for V8 and coming out with the new non-LTS support versions for V9 and 10 and so on. So you can always leverage the latest and greatest pieces. So just as a refresher from what we did in the 3.7 release is having the new experience. That experience is driven by a Kubernetes feature or project called the service catalog, which then will speak to various services off the platform or on the platform via the Open Service Broker API. And that broker will advertise its capabilities. And we had, within that time frame, the OpenShift, the template broker, the OpenShift Ansible broker, the AWS service broker, and you can bring your own broker to the mix. A lot of updates around the OpenShift Ansible broker. So one of the things is we actually created an upstream community around the broker itself called the Automation Broker. You can see the Git URL there, so github.com/Ansible Playbook Bundle. We added support for being able to broker behind or get the, the playbooks behind an HTTP proxy, so that support's there, and link to a YouTube video. Updates to a number of the database backends, so better handling of parameterization for deploying those. And if you're using OpenShift to develop locally on your desktop machine, if it's via Minishift, there's an add-on now, so you can easily add on the broker as part of that add-on. And then various other capabilities around network isolation for multi-tenant environments, and then some experimental work around async binding in a broker. So will allow us to handle cases when it takes a fair amount of time to be able to provision a request or bind requests that take us longer than expected. So with that, we've added some pretty cool experience improvements too. So now when you're within a project, within the service catalog, you can, or within a project, you can now get to the service catalog without having to jump back out, if you will, and then kind of navigate through. So easy and within context. This one's the one I use a lot and really like is now I can do a quick search for whatever I want to add to the platform. So I can just type database like you see here in this example, and then it'll give me all the ones that are tagged a database, and then give me a quick title and also the icon for what the service is. As we introduced the new interface, there's a number of power users that like to go into specific projects, or they want to see just the list of projects that they have. And so we now set the ability, they have the capability to set what is your preferred homepage. So when you log back in, it'll bring you back to whatever you set as whatever that preference is. And as this demonstration is showing, is hopping back into a specific project. Another key thing, especially if you're in an environment, there's some regulations as far as inactivity timeout. So now you can set the web console to log out after a certain period of time. And so very simple, you can use set via an Ansible variable highlighted below, just give it the number of minutes and it will honor that. If you don't set it, or if you set it to 0, then it will never log out. And that's the default. The one other thing that, when people are looking at running OpenShift in the web console, and not too many times you hear people ask for a feature to run as a pod, but by doing it, it really gave us some great flexibility and enabled us to do a couple different features we've been wanting to. So one, it sort of better leverages the platform itself to run and manage it, so we can have greater flexibility. But also, you can now change things through a config map. So if there's certain parameters within the web console you want to change, or you can now just go into that config map, make those changes, and then it will auto detect that those changes has occurred and then reload with those changes. So an easy way for making some quick changes to the web console without having to jump into the master YAML. We've learned a lot by running Java applications, and namely Jenkins on the platform itself. We've had a number of customers who were using the Jenkins workers with Java, namely the Maven one, which oftentimes they were using Maven to invoke Gradle, which Gradle would run a job to launch another JVM often. And the way that the parameters were set to the memory limits of Java was either wrong for what the C group settings were, or just kept narrowing down to very, very small amounts. So did a fair amount of work in the 3.9 release to ensure that they were being set intelligently, and then that would be cascaded and honored properly all the way down to all the different JVMs that are running within that Jenkins worker. So if you look at our Maven Jenkins worker image and the different settings around it, you'll see all that as part of the scripting and configuration of that. And then a sort of a potpourri of things that have been done within dev experience and builds. OC cluster up some flexibility in the number of persistent volumes. We're able to specify the default tolerations for builds so that you can have final control over where build lands on which nodes. The combination of having cryo on nodes along with the Docker daemons, so they can coexist and use the Docker daemon for some of the build scenarios, and then making the OpenShift secrets available to sort of Jenkins jobs via the Jenkins as credentials. So some very useful things there in the dev experience build side of the house. I mentioned using Minishift for local development. So Minishift 1.4 comes with a lot of improvements around the whole add-on system. I mentioned the add-on for the OpenShift Ansible broker, but that's one example. But there's ways of handling the dependencies, all the management of the different add-ons, and so forth. Caching of container images, we hear this a lot, just not from a performance standpoint, but also as people try to work disconnected in Minishift. And then some of the additional capabilities helping out around static IPs for Hyper-V and host mount folder using SSHFS. And one of the things that developers really look forward to is updated or current content. So happy to say that we've been able to include within 3.9 the SCL 3.0 updates, which give you database updates from MongoDB, MariaDB, and PostgreSQL. The others around the runtime. So SCL has Node.js 8 now, PHP 7.1, and Python 3.6. And then a new addition is the Nginx instance. So that's a great addition to the set of applications you can run. And with that, I will hand it over to Mark.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead and start off first here with our networking group. So the network engineering team has really focused their attention on the stability, scale, performance, and general robustness of the solution over anything else this release. And one of those features in particular that received attention was semi-automatic namespace-wide egress IP. So um, uh, this feature was actually GA'd in 3.7, but it represents the first half of a larger goal of delivering automatically generated source IP addresses per project. And so this heavily requested feature from our customers is useful for many use cases, the most common being filtering of traffic at the edge of the cluster. So why am I repeating it here in our What's New slides for 3.9? Because a great deal of work has gone into it for this release to enhance its stability, almost as if it were a Gen 2 version of the 3.7 release feature. So those that want to use it in 3.9 will have an improved user experience. They'll be using the code base that will be used in follow-on development to enhance the feature with HA, and also eliminate the need for the admin to manually configure the project's IP. So look for this to change to automatic from semi-automatic in 3.10. The next thing is in 3.9, we're supporting our own HA proxy RPM for consumption by the router. So in earlier versions of HA proxy, meaning HA proxy 1.8 or older, a route configuration change could or would necessarily cause an outage. The outage is small for small clusters, but it grew with the size of the deployment, so we needed to address the issue. The diagram on the right is a flow demonstrating the problem. So upon starting starting up of the services, it would generate a new process with a new configuration, and then what it tried to do is bind to all listening ports. And if this is a brand new instance starting up, it would generally succeed. But if this was, say, for example, an upgrade or an update, it likely would fail, and the reason being is because something else had already bound to the port. So the new process would send a signal to the old process asking it to temporarily release the port, and this is where the black hole outage would occur, represented by the black circle. So during that time, there was a finite amount of time whereby between when it was asked to release the port and when it would actually try again to try to bind to the port. And eventually, after trying, it would either succeed, and then it would let the old process know it could quit, or it would fail and just tell the old process to continue taking care of the incoming connections. So what we aim to do is remove that black hole part. And so in 3.9, in this case, HA Proxy 1.8 sees no difference between updates and upgrades. What happens instead is a new process is used with a new configuration, and the listening socket's file descriptor is transferred from the old process to the new process, almost as if it was using the duplicate command or function. So the connection is never closed, and also all the state information comes over with it. So in that sense, the change is seamless. There's no outage. And also, this is going to enable our ability to do things in the future like HTTP2. The next one. So I'm transitioning now to the master group. So our master group, they're the ones, they do a lot of things, but they are the ones that are primarily responsible for rebasing the newest versions of Kubernetes into OpenShift. And so they have a tremendous amount of work that they do. So I'm going to hit some of the highlights of some of the things that they did for 3.9 in addition to that rebasing. So the first one is simply stated, stateful sets, daemon sets, and deployments are now stable and supported. So they are moving from tech preview to GA in OpenShift 3.9. If you'd like additional information about what these things are or what they do, we have some links here to the upstream Kubernetes documentation that describes them in more detail. The next one, central audit capability. So central auditing provides the ability to audit items that admins would like to either view and or trace. So some examples of the kinds of information that they might be interested in is listed in the two bulleted sections of the slide. And this is definitely not a complete list, but they're the ones that I thought were interesting and would fit on the slide. So looking at this list, you can see the level of detail that's now possible to audit. Enabling that auditing is fairly straightforward. It's a matter of configuring, as you see on the right-hand side, it's a matter of configuring the auditing in the master config and then restarting the service to put it into effect. So the example provided here is a really simple one. There are definitely additional and more advanced customizations that can be specified for the level and types of auditing. The master group also added support for deployments to OC status. So one of the responsibilities of the master team is the CLI, and this feature is an example of the kinds of enhancements they do to continually improve the user experience. So prior to 3.9, when executing the OC status command, it would not show nested information about deployments. An example of what that looked like is in the box in the upper right side of the slide. With 3.9, the OC status command now provides nested deployment set information in its output, providing more useful information from an often run command. The next one is dynamic admission controller follow-up. So extensible admission becomes tech preview in OpenShift 3.9, and we're targeting GA of this feature in 3.10. So an admission controller is a piece of code that intercepts requests to the Kubernetes API server prior to the persistence of the object, but after the request is authenticated and authorized. So for incoming requests, there are two admission phases they can go through. There's the mutation phase and the validation phase, as shown in the flow diagram at the bottom. So mutation provides the ability to inspect, validate, and mutate the resource content itself. So an example of this might be the ability to mutate resources like pods. For example, the Istio project is discussing use of this feature to inject the Envoy sidecar containers into pods automatically. The other phase, validation, allows inspection and validation of the resource content, and it enforces any invariance on that content. So an example of this might be inspection of an image tags that might have been forced into a SHA-SUM. An admission controller could be written that prevents certain types of images or image SHA combinations from running. If you'd like more information about this, one of our lead engineers, David Eads, wrote a really great blog article that's linked to here in addition to the upstream docs link. In this next one, feature gates. So for this one, admins have told us that they want the ability to select what alpha, beta, or tech preview features they enable in their production environment, rather than assume the risk of these yet to be fully vetted features. So it's really a liability thing. So feature gates enable this selectivity for each of the master components in Kubernetes, such as the API server, the controller manager, the scheduler, and the API server. In the master server. So using key value pairs in their corresponding YAML configuration to do that selectivity. So each feature should probably be individually enabled, disabled in each component, unless you really understand what exactly is using it, but probably specified in all of the different components for most users to be on the safe side. So you would specify these configurations in all of, the API server, controller manager, scheduler, et cetera. So in the example shown below, we see them being configured in this particular case in the API server and in the kubelet. So on the one on the left, we see the CPU manager feature, which, if you're unfamiliar with it, has the capabilities of things like CPU pinning, being enabled on the API server to use its beta version. And the one on the right, we see an example of the device plugin alpha feature being enabled on the kubelet. Switching gears a bit now, we'll talk a little bit about the reference architecture implementation guides from our end-to-end provider integration group. So this group has been doing a lot of work to bring all of our reference architecture implementation guides up to the latest release, in this case to OpenShift 3.9. So the reference architecture guides won't GA right at 3.9 because they have to be QA'd against the actually released version of OpenShift 3.9. So expect them to become available approximately 4 to 6 weeks after the GA of 3.9. All of the cloud provider RefArcs are planned to be updated, with the only guide that's at risk right now being the Google Cloud Platform Guide, but we hope that won't be the case. Also, the reference architecture for Rev is targeting Rev 4.2, but the release date for it is very close to that of the RefArc release date, so it may actually fall back to 4.1 and we would update it later. A big change in the RefArcs this time around is the deprecation of what have been unsupported glue code. The glue code that I'm referring to is the ancillary scripts, the playbooks, GitHub repos, etc., that have been used in the past and were unsupported. So the plan is to move all of that glue code functionality into the provisioner code provided by the installer itself so that we can, in fact, support it. And that brings us to the end of this briefing.
Well, that was a lot of information. So thank you both for this. We haven't had a lot of questions in the chat, but we have lots of people online. I'm wondering if anyone has a question that they'd like to ask. I think if you can post the URL, or actually I'll post the URL for these slides in the on the OpenShift Commons mailing list and on blog.openshift.com shortly. One question has popped up, I think. Oh, there's a question about 3.8 being skipped a la Windows 9. Is there a migration from 3.8 to 3.9?
Yeah, so they're really, you can think of it, there's not really even a 3.8. There one that does exist, but the upgrader will do a sort of a silent skip of it. It will upgrade first to 3.8, and then once it verifies that it's stable, it'll move it to 3.9. So if you happen to end up on a 3.8 release, then that was a problem. And so it should be completely transparent to you. We've done this on a number of our test clusters. We're running this on our OpenShift online starter clusters, and we have a mix of 3.9, and we actually ran one of them with the 3.8 bits to just verify it for a week back in January. And now we have it fully running on 3.9. So yes, you might see it, but you should never see it. It should just work.
Okay. So,
yep, so 3.7 to 3.9.
Yeah, he's asking the upgrade question. Yeah, cool. Are there any? There's another question that's just come in from Clement. Do you have examples of admission hooks used for secure deployment change? Depreciating obsolete software, verifying attributes of pods, containers to check they pass QA, or other promising open source framework around that?
Yeah, I think rather than provide all the details here, I would strongly recommend you check out David Eads' blog. You can Google for it or follow the link in the presentation. But he talks about a lot of really good examples and provides links to all sorts of additional information about enabling webhooks in the process.
Okay, and there's one more, and I'll post the link to the David Eads along with the blog this year. I think the link is in the slides. When deployment coexists with deployment config going in the future.
So yes, so as mentioned, the deployments are coming out of tech preview, so they're G8 and 3.9, and so they'll coexist in the 3.9 release, and they'll continue to coexist until we find that the deployment feature of Kubernetes meets the requirements of everything that the deployment configs did, and then we would have a migration path. But for now, they'll just coexist.
And Arn is asking a question about container native storage. And I think we talked through a lot of this detail last week in Tushar's demo and talk. But is it still still plan to release CNCS in sync with OCP?
I don't know what the plan is for CNS release schedule and syncing with OCP. I'll look at Mark and see if he knows. But I might have to go back to the Tushar recording and see if he covered it.
Yeah, and I can ask him the question offline too and get that for you. I don't know that release schedule cadence.
Right.
Are there any other questions poking around in that chat? If not, I want to thank you both for an awesome presentation, and I will again grab the slides from you and take the video and make it available as quickly as possible, probably tomorrow on blog.openshift.com, along with a number of the references and resources that were mentioned in this talk. So thanks again. We look forward to this. Next week, I think we have Kubernetes 1.10 updates scheduled with Derek Carr. So while this was focused on what's in OCP 3.9, next week is going to talk a little bit more just generically what's in Kubernetes 1.10. So there'll be lots of information there coming at you in the next coming weeks. All right. Take care all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.